We are live. Hi, JC. Welcome to Venture with Grace.
Hey Grace, so great to be here.
Yay. Okay. So first of all, I feel like you're such a like I feel like you have such amazing career in product. And then the first time I met you, actually the first time I met your husband, he was like raving about you. And then I looked into your profile, I was like, damn, can she be on the pod? And I can't believe it, like I met you at the dinner. So I'm just like very thankful that you're here. To
It's
start with
always great when your partner is your biggest hype person.
Yeah,
That's,
totally, like,
that's the
shout out to
goal. That's the
him.
goal.
Exactly. So, like, I was like, "Wait, yeah, that's so amazing." And, like, okay, so to start the show, I would love for the audience to get to know you a little bit more. You first started your product career at Pocket Gyms, and you have worked on, like, various different iconic products like Dropbox, like Airbnb, and, now fast forward to today, you are the CPO of Laurel. And why don't we talk about, like, what were some core lessons that you've learned early on in your career, kind of shaping into who you are today?
Great question. I think that the biggest thing I think about a lot is this concept of embracing the adventure.
Mhm,
I think back through all of my decisions, all the places I've worked, that very much was what I've leaned into, right? So I started off
mhm,
my career in consulting,
mhm,
different types of consulting, economic consulting, private equity consulting, strategy consulting, and it was a big leap of faith to leave
mhm,
all of that, especially as someone with an econ background. Like that made
mhm,
sense to leave all of that and move to San Francisco and work in tech. At that time, people were only hired if they had CS degrees, and so this idea
mhm,
of like leaning into the venture, starting at a mobile gaming company that was only 30 people, and I specifically chose
mhm,
a very small company at the time. I wanted to be at a startup. I wanted to be somewhere that was moving really quickly. And I wanted to be building mobile. This
mhm,
is the time when not every company had skated to that puck,
mhm,
and so that was like embracing adventure. And I think that throughout my journey, it's all about that. Like, how do I go and work with the best engineers in Silicon Valley at Dropbox? Like, embrace the
mhm,
adventure. Lots of imposter syndrome, but embrace the adventure. How
mhm,
do I go work with the best designers at Airbnb? Same kind of concept. I think that's a lot of what drives how I think about what
mhm.
gives me a ton of energy. This idea of just leaning into what is ambiguous and
Mhm.
fun.
For sure. I wonder, okay, so I also want to say that, like, I feel like you really accelerated your career fast, and then, like, you became the SVP of product of Webflow, and then Linktree's chief product officer, and then now at Laurel as chief product officer. And, like, I feel like a lot of people may not be like moving up so fast. And also, like, I wanted to say that, like, I feel like you have such a great personal brand in the product realm. Like, so obviously beyond like other these like amazing podcasts you have been on, I feel like you have built such a strong personality online as well. So maybe we could, if you could walk us through on, like, besides, like, obviously I guess, like, embrace your just like curiosity or embracing that venture, like what are, I guess, like, have you ever made like any strategic decision that you feel like, wow, like that was a right decision versus, like, a lot of people maybe just working, but like they won't really get on that leadership level.
Yeah, I think that, I've never thought of my career as this is how you get to the next level because I actually
Mhm,
don't think of careers as, the typical ladder. I
mhm,
really do think that it is a jungle gym. You never know
mhm,
what's going to
mhm,
happen when you join a company. You never know. And honestly, and I give this advice to any product person that I mentor or,
mhm,
through Reforge, I've been doing kind of career coaching. It's not
mhm,
about this idea of like progression, quote unquote, or titles, quote unquote. It's actually more about, are you working on big problems at places
mhm,
that have high growth? And that is really important because when you are doing that, one, you're usually working with the best people. And the most
mhm,
important thing that accelerates your career is the
mhm,
networks that you are part of and that you are
mhm,
surrounding yourself with. Because one, you are truly learning and becoming great.
mhm,
And
mhm,
those great people go off and do other great things.
mhm,
So I would say if I look back in my career, it's not about,
mhm,
some of the things you mentioned. I'd say the
mhm,
biggest accelerant, honestly, was my time at Dropbox. My time
mhm,
at Dropbox, we were with, it's still to this day, probably the highest density of talent
mhm,
that I've ever seen, right? And so,
mhm,
people in that time, the first 200 people at Dropbox, people have gone off. They've started companies, amazing companies. They've gone off and, they're in the venture funds out there that are funding these companies.
Mhm.
They're amazing operators because the people who joined
Mhm.
Dropbox that early really cared about impact, and had to learn. It was like a fire hose of like, oh, this is breaking, and
Mhm.
that's what do we do? Like, and or like, where how do we accelerate? And so it really was less about it, because again, you join a company, no one knows what anything, like no one knows what's going to happen, especially today in the age of AI. You're like, wow, everything is changing every
Mhm.
month, every day. Right. And so it's always to me about like, how do you go to really interesting business problems as again, I come from more of a business background. So
Mhm.
I've always been drawn to problems that are not just a technology problem, but it's the meeting of the technology problem with a business problem. And over the years, I've really, really cultivated a strong love for design. So when
Mhm.
you have your business problem, and a technology problem, and you actually have great design intuition, and you're able to see how UX can become a moat, that's where I think you end up magically at the companies that are great, right? And so
Mhm.
that's really how I think about it. And I'll just give you like one example. Like I went to WeWork, and the year that I was at WeWork, the entire thing imploded. I think other than Trump headline news that year in
Mhm.
2019, it was WeWork and Adam. And so
Mhm.
I just want to stress there is no linear path. Like you will go to places where you're like, whoa, that was really unexpected in a great way, and then you'll go to places where you're like, oh, that was unexpected in a not what I thought way. And so it's less about that. I think the bigger things are going to be, are you going to places where you really see the growth in the business? Are you going
Mhm.
to places where you are surrounded by amazing people and working with amazing people, and therefore that's going to accelerate your career? And then ultimately, it is your judgment, right? Like
Mhm.
like at the scale of places. I joined Webflow. It was like sub 20 million ARR, and left when I was closer to 200. Like that is actual work that team put in during those years, right? So it's less about going somewhere that's great. It's more about, can you identify the opportunities that can be great, seeing
Mhm.
the fact that you can bring in great people, and or if you're early in your career, seeing that there are great people, and then making it great.
Mm. I love that. I feel like, first of all, like select the people, like pick the one that with like a really high talent density. And then you really, I guess like you never know what's gonna happen, but you have to like I guess like actively think of way to pick like the big problem like and the high growth in a high growth company to kind of like just learn things. It may be good or bad, but in the end of the day, you can like learn a lot. I wonder when it comes to like, since you mentioned about like Webflow, um, like when you joined, it was like sub 20 million ARR. When you left, it's like $200 million ARR. Why don't we talk about like at that kind of like speed, what would you have to do as the SVP of product? Like, how do you kind of like structure your time on building the product itself, managing the team to build the product, and maybe like think about like how does that translate into revenue? Um, like since like you probably have to work on it with like other revenue leader or like other go to market function. I guess like maybe if you could give us like a teardown, like how do you kind of like work on your own product as well as like, make sure that like it also tied to the business growth as well.
Yeah. Couple of things. So I will talk about some principles that are evergreen in my mind. It was true then, true today. But I also really want to stress that the world of product and product leadership is changing dramatically. So,
Mhm.
product from 2000 to, 20, sorry, 2020 to 2024, like what that looked like then versus what product leadership looks like now is very, very different, right?
Mhm.
And so I also want to talk about what has really changed. So what's evergreen? At the end of the day, to me, a product leader is someone who is looking at all the different facets. You're not looking at just what is the product. And I deeply believe this in the fact that, in a sense that I think of it this way, which is, what is the story that you want to tell the world? And that's really aligned to your vision, your mission.
Mhm.
What is the business going to look like, right? And a big input to what the
Mhm.
business is going to look like is, how do you deliver value and capture that value? So I have a big saying, which is, I always want to start with pricing and packaging, in the sense that
Mhm.
if you do not know how people are going to buy your product and gain value from your product, then really
Mhm.
you're kind of building from either what gut, which is not great, or you're
Mhm.
building from the fact that you have a very small user base, maybe it's a user base that you have today and they're very local. And again, also not great because you're not looking at the global kind of like maximum and where you could go with the business. You're kind of looking at just right now. So I believe really deeply in this idea of, what is the business lens of what we're doing and how do we actually capture value in the form of like actually articulating your pricing and packaging. And then you come back to, your product. And I think it is an interesting framework because I do think a lot of people sometimes think that the product role is to just work on the roadmap. And the question is, well, how do you know what's in your roadmap if you don't do what I just described, which is the story, which is the business, and then finally the product and therefore the roadmap. Mm-hmm. So that to me is always the same. So again, very specifically at Webflow, there were a lot of open questions, which is, Webflow is a beloved product by a lot of folks in the community. Even at the time I joined, and huge kudos to Vlad and Brian, Sergi. And then the question was, is that how we're going to grow for the next 5 to 10 years? Or is actually the value going to be the fact that Webflow is a product that delivers pixel perfect websites. Mm-hmm. So when you think about that, you think about who's going to want that. This goes back to the vision is we want to empower everyone to build for the web, and that is unchanging. But then the business piece, that is key, which is ultimately how are you going to capture value? Are you going to continue to capture value from freelancers, agencies, small, medium businesses? Or are you going to capture value from larger enterprises? And that was a really big shift that we made over those 3 to 4 years. Which is how do we build a product that is enterprise ready? How do we build a product that really delivers this value prop to the group of people, not only with the need, but also the budget inside of a company, mm-hmm. right? And so that is how I think about it. And then very quickly, this is where I get into the differences between then and now. And again, it's not that long, but like the world is changing at this speed. So, back at Webflow, we did have to grow to some degree with headcount, right? Like you were making an enterprise move. AI is not at the point it is today. Agents really wasn't a thing. And so you're like, well, I have to scale literally with headcount. I have to scale sales with headcount. I have to scale engineering product design with headcount. And so what's really interesting is, at Webflow, my org was, closer to like 100 people versus today at Laurel, I am literally like Ryan, we're going to IPO this company. We call it like 100 full-time employees, right? And so that ratio is very, very different. And, today I'm hiring there are 3 product leaders in the 3 biggest areas. They're going to operate like GMs. And with the technology that we have, one product person has so much leverage because a product person is not just a product person. It's the product person, all the agents that they're using, right? All like the full stack, and the fact that they can flex, and product is no longer a roadmap creator, a spec writer. They are a builder, a true builder. And by the way, not just product is a builder, but every single person is a builder. Like a designer is a builder, not just a designer. They're able to flex into the front end. They're able to flex into the product. And so when you've got everyone in an organization becoming a builder, it changes your headcount needs. And it's all actually much more about leverage than it is about heads. And so that is where because I know you asked a question, which is like, how did you think about the org design, the scale, like all of those pieces. I did have to be very thoughtful back then. I'm still very thoughtful, but the lens that I'm being thoughtful about it is very, very different. It's much more around how do I create a combination, a system? Like how do I architect a system where everybody can be a builder and you can do all of these things versus before it was almost like, well, how do I almost create the right trifecta on EPD for this area and have the right ratios. And so the world has really shifted over the last 3 years.
For sure. I have so many questions there. So first of all, like walk us through like your thinking framework on like who is like the 3 product people that you're going to hire. And then what is your like kind of like architecture kind of look like in the agent leading product building society right now?
Yes. Okay. So again, always be recruiting. Part of the reason why we do these things. So, maybe I'll start with what is Laurel? I'm sure a lot of people are wondering like, what is this thing? So Laurel is an AI time intelligence platform. And what I mean by that is what we're able to do is we create a digital footprint of your work. And so we're able to see, honestly, like all the things that you're doing. And as a result, say, especially in industries like legal, accounting, consulting, and finance, so on and so forth, hey, you run your work based on services to clients. And frequently, the services you render are in the form of hours billed. And I also believe, by the way, we can come back to this, like that is going through a massive radical transformation. And Laurel is at the forefront of kind of partnering with companies, with firms to really lead that transformation. This idea of like, are we going to price on the outcome as opposed to necessarily price on the hours? But the reality is, for a lot of the world, they are doing timesheets. And when you are doing timesheets, it's really the wedge for Laurel. When you know what you're doing and you're able to then categorize that correctly, so you can give essentially an automated, almost like an agentic timesheet. So that's what Laurel is, right? When I think about that, right, there's like a couple of pieces there. When I think about like the right product makeup, there needs to be a deep UX piece. Now, I'm a huge believer that design creates an incredible moat, right? Like I believe in today's world, there's going to be a data moat, there's going to be a brand moat, and then I do actually believe, especially in the application layer, there's a design moat. I use Granola, I love Granola, and I think that they've really nailed the design. Now, there are a lot of other note-taking tools out there. In fact, there were many before Granola, and there are still many. In fact, there are many large titans that are pushing out equivalent Granola products. But there's something just delightful about the way Granola works. And I think that for that reason, there are a lot of us who use it and love it. And so for that reason, one of the big things I'm looking for in the product team that we have here at Laurel is that love for craft, that ability to basically create something that is incredibly delightful. And here's another key piece. I'll use this analogy, which is like a self-driving car analogy, right? So level 1 through level 5. Level 1 for something like time entry would essentially be, I am manually doing my time. And again, that is the industry. The industry today, and this is so wild to me, will start a timer. Literally, you open up a timer, you hit start when you start work, which takes brain power, and it's usually not right when you start the work. And then you have to hit stop, and then you have to like write the entry in terms of what you did. And like all of that, like that is so tedious. Nobody practicing law, no one doing consulting. Like any of those things are like, I love my timesheet. I love doing my time. In fact, they're like, it is the thing I really hate. And sometimes I don't do it for a while. And I got to spend my weekend doing that. Right. And so that is something that can be automated away. And that to me, like right now, the world is at level 1. We want to get to level 5. Level 5 is truly automated. Like we just have collected all the information perfectly correctly. And we've actually also put a timesheet together, which by the way, it's not an art to timekeeping and an art to right? And it's just perfect. And we're kind of at what I call like level 3 right now, like pushing into level 4, which is with a human in the loop piece. And again, this is where the UX matters so much. Like I think a lot of people are like AI is just like a magical thing that does magical things. Well, no, you have to give it guardrails. And the right way to give AI guardrails is through the design of the product. And so again, just coming back to this idea of like really nailing the UI, the UX of how do you go from a level 3, which is not perfect all the time. You need that confirmation, that learning. And how do we make it not like tedious, but actually fun and lightweight? So that's 1. 2, we are building something where I'm a big believer of this: bring consumer delight to enterprise products. Enterprise users are users. And for too long, there's been a terrible dichotomy of the person paying for the product is not the user using the product in enterprise businesses, right? Or like in enterprise sales. And as a result, usually you get this like terrible product where you're like, why did they buy this? Oh, because it had these probably controls and they made these promises. But like no one loves using enterprise products. There are very few enterprise products that people love. And that's my deep belief of bringing that love of consumer, the love that a consumer has and the bar of polish and craft that is in consumer products to enterprise products. And that's like even things like, how do you build an admin system, like a dashboard, controls, time control, releasing time, invoicing? They don't sound sexy, but if you think about the delightful way to build all those things, that is a game changer. So that's kind of like the second piece. And the last piece is I said, we're an AI time intelligence platform. It's all about the data. All about the data. And so how do you find the right folks who are really data first and thinking about how do I use data, not in a way that's as route as I'm going to show you a bunch of graphs, but like, what's the future of data visualization, of giving you insights, of helping you like, kind of like be a coach, be a mentor, giving you the right things just in time. And so that is the last piece.
I love that. I wanted to like double click on the last piece. I think as a founder right now, like sometimes I don't know like what to collect because like I collect everything. Like I like study my data. I look at their customer profile and then I look at like who attends or whatever, like their followers. But the problem is like I don't really know what that meant for me. And then there's like no place I could like build like a tool on top of some of the existing platforms. Like, how do you guys know like what to collect? And then like, how do you kind of like study it or like make up like some sort of like a report to like for people to like actually identify what's like their core KPI to like help them, you know, either make more money or save more time or save more money or just like be happier. So how do you kind of like think about that?
Totally. So I'm a big believer of, you always have to understand the customer problem. And the customer problem is not necessarily the thing that they are telling you that they want you to build. In fact, it is rarely that.
Mhm.
And so, speaking about you, I'd be like, Grace, I would honestly would sit down and be like, what are your goals?
Mhm.
And by the way, like you can't make assumptions. Like, sometimes people are like, I have revenue goals and that's trumps everything. And sometimes
Mhm.
people are like, no, I actually have lifestyle goals, or I have a balance of this, this, and this. And this is how I stack rank them. Right. And like, I think
Mhm.
so, too often it's very easy, I would say, for
Mhm.
founders, product people, everyone to
Mhm.
go and have conversations in which the thing that comes out is an ask and you take it verbatim, you take it face value, versus really digging deep to be like, what is it that you're trying to do? Let me understand the spirit. Let me understand like the motivation. And then
Mhm.
that makes me be able to say, we should be doing XYZ and collecting XYZ data. So that is more of like, the analogy for you, Grace, but then going into an actual, company, into a firm, right? Like here's what people really care about today. They're like, I have 1,000,001 AI tooling vendors hitting me up.
Mhm. Mm.
How do I, and I think everyone's philosophy right now is kind of, let all the flowers bloom, but at some point you're going to cut the flowers.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Spending
Very, very
the
soon.
way, yeah, the
Yeah.
way that most companies are spending. And
Mhm.
like people are like, I don't even know what the ROI is. So like, why would
Mhm.
I keep doing that? And again, there are two tools. Which one's better? Which one do I keep? And so far, again, history, everyone's making that off of just gut feel, or maybe there's some metric somewhere in a particular organization that you're looking at. But what Laurel does, we're able to actually really be able to quantify all of those pieces, right? So we can tell you with conviction, here's how much you are using these tools. And what's
Mhm.
really, again, amazing about what I think of as like a third party neutral platform, and that's, again, a big core belief of mine. Like Linktree was a third party neutral platform, and it made a lot of sense where there's a lot of other platforms. Like there's a LinkedIn, there's an Instagram, there's a TikTok. Like there's only like more and more growing platforms. And so having
Mhm.
something that unifies all of that and gives you it at a glance is really helpful. Same thing for Laurel. Like the reality is you are going to use Claude. You're going to use ChatGPT. You're going to use, XYZ. There are so many tools out there, right? And so
Mhm.
no one tool is going to rule them all, because it's impossible for one tool to be the best at everything. And
Mm.
so if that's the problem that you have and will have for many decades to come, most likely, then being able to quantify in a way that is platform agnostic, that is able to be like, well, I have no horse in the race. I am not any of these companies. I will
Mhm.
tell you with complete honesty, because all I want is your company, your firm to be successful. Like, this is what's going on. This is how, like, you've paid this much for a license. This is
Mhm.
how much usage is actually happening. And it's not just that, because you can kind
Mhm.
of squint at it and maybe figure that out. But it's not just the fact you're spending X amount of time in Y application. It's also the fact that when you look at this across your entire company, you're able to say, well, hey, this one team is really, really effective at, let's just call it, BD piece, closing deals. What are they doing? And you're able to do that comparison, right? And so going back to, again, like, what is the problem? You need to identify at a glance, like for every company, every person, anything that you're trying to
Mhm.
solve for, what is the biggest problem that they have? If let's say in private equity, one of the biggest things they're trying to understand is, how do I shift my time from doing the tedious back and forth of due diligence into more of the, like things that require a true human touch, sourcing deals, getting a lay of the land in a way that is more like, again, not the part where, again, deep research can do it for you, but the part that's like, I need to meet with a founder, or I need to meet with, a CEO and really get a feel of, do they have grit? AI can't do that for you, right? So being able to really quantify the things that are truly human versus the things that can be automated and should be automated, and should be a combination of the human and an agent, for example, that's where the questions really come and the opportunities come. And specifically, again, it comes back to knowing what people are trying to solve for, because otherwise, you're right. If you don't know what people are trying to solve for, you're going to give everyone all the data. It's just going to be noise.
For sure. I wonder, so like since I'm like just furiously taking notes, like one of the things is like you mentioned about like
You don't have an automated note taker taking notes for
I
you?
have a note taker, but I feel like I want to be like actively listening because when I like take notes, I kind of like feel like it just like double down on my brain's
Yeah,
like ability to do
people.
it.
I
Yeah.
still use a notebook despite all the tools I use. There's something
Yeah.
really
Me
tactical
too.
about like writing that one thing down. Yes.
Yeah, for sure. But I'm like such a slow writer. Like if I write everything down, it will be like 3 keywords and then I'll forget about like the rest. So but like I'm like a fast typer. So um I think like one of the things that like you basically mentioned is like, kind of like keep track of like the usage of different things. I think that's like a really popular idea these days. And then like I feel like the current strategy for every AI startup was to just like land and expand. So like basically you enter with like some sort of like niche function and then you expand into like a tool of everything. That's like literally everybody's pitch right now. And then there's like 7,000 different like AI agents that's like can automate each part of the engineering team right now. So I wonder like from I guess like the other day I was like looking at the like some of the YC companies or even some of them came to our dinner. There's like a AI engineer who like manage other engineers, and then there's like the I guess like what is it called? Like so like the on-call engineer, and then there's like a assistant that manage like other assistant, and there is just like 1,000 different things. So I wonder like and then also like we like the other day, so like we just did our Smart AI 100 for like C and Series A companies like list. So we're about to like officially launch the list. We did like the summit 2 days ago, um and then like we're doing the launch, and then like one of the founders who is building basically what you said about like keep tracking on like basically the rocket money but for enterprise. It's like you sign up too many AI agents, let me tell you which one you actually use. So basically that's kind of like a service now. So like I wonder, how do you think about like first of all like what do you use in your AI enterprise, and then the other part is like how do you think about like building one product first? You also mentioned about like um this is something you mentioned on a different podcast. You said like basically like you want to build like minimum lovable product. So like maybe we could start with like what would be the first product that you build when you enter the organization, and like how do you kind of arrive at that conclusion after maybe chatting with a customer? Like I feel like sometimes the customer insights are like could be all over the place, or like could be really hard to build in general. Like how do you think about like what to build and what not to build?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, that's like 5 questions. It's like one AI
I
tools.
think there's probably two big buckets in what you just said.
Yeah,
Like one bucket is almost internal AI. So
yeah,
this idea
internal
of
AI,
how do
yes.
you know what to invest in at all? I mean, like you're basically saying, Jay-Z, you're totally right in that this is a problem for a lot of companies.
Mhm,
Now for Laurel, how did you guys, or Linktree, or any of the companies you've been
mhm.
at, how did you know what tools to invest in? I think I'll answer that piece. And then the second question is kind of more broad, right? Like how do you even know where to take the product? You come in,
Yeah, exactly.
product is what it is. How do you know where to invest? So I'll answer both of those, and I'll start
Mhm,
with the first one.
mhm,
Actually, there was just a first round article that came out for folks who want to go kind of deeper and read more prose, which is
mhm,
essentially, Fernaz and I over at Linktree, how did we, Fernaz, my engineering partner, how did we think about AI internally? And also big
mhm,
shout out to Alex, who's like such a AI. I think you
mhm,
need the leadership team to be like, we're all in. All right. And then the more
mhm.
that the CEO can be like, we're all in and we're going to model it, that is, first of all, I can't stress how important the mindset is, right? Like the cultural tone setting of like, we are doing this. Every leader is using as many tools as they can, trying as many tools as they can, pushing the team to try as many tools as they can versus, being like almost a gatekeeper and saying, I don't know how security is going to feel about this, how InfoSec is going to feel about this. I think the first thing to just stress is there's like a big cultural shift that needs to happen. And I do think most companies are past that point, which is great. And I can come back to that if you're interested in terms of what are some of the ways to get that cultural shift to happen if it's not just organic and innate. Now, specifically, what's a tool stack, right? So I really think about, again, I think of every product team, every company that I've been at is a product the same way I think about the product I'm building, right? Like, so how do you treat these things like a product? And really what you're doing is similar to building an external product. What does success look like? So and again, that is really important to align on, because you could be at a company where you're like, what's really important right now is I don't know, for whatever reason, burn. And as a result, like, we do want to be more diligent about our budget. Like, I'm not saying that, again, I typically believe that with the way things are going, when you invest in tooling, you're going to get outsized returns and it's totally worth it. But I just want to stress that, like, every leadership team needs to have a conversation around, like, what are our parameters, right? Because it's really easy for people to be running in 10 different directions. And so let's say you're at the point where you're like, I'm willing to invest. I want to lean all in. Culturally, we're there. We're either going there or we're there already. I think, the reality is, like, there are things that have hype for good reason, meaning they work. And what's really great, I would say, I do think you also start with, well, actually, you can look at every single function, and there are products for every single function. There are products for engineering, there are products for marketing, there are products for sales. To your point, you throw a stone and there's either a large company or a YC company or some sort of startup that's basically like, I will make this whole thing, your go-to-market motion way easier, right? So I think there's just, honestly, LinkedIn is a really great place. LinkedIn, I personally think LinkedIn is probably a better place than like Twitter, like X these days. But like X does have nuggets too, of just like, what are people using? And for the companies that you admire, for the leaders that you admire, what are they recommending, right? And so again, the Linktree article lays out the entire tool stack, honestly, for Linktree. So maybe I'll spend a little bit of time on Laurel. So, for Laurel, we are an enterprise business in a way that Linktree is not. Linktree is much more prosumer, right? Although we do have a marketplace with, brands, and brands to me are quite enterprise, but I would say that's a different level of enterprise. And when you're talking to the Ernst and Youngs of the world, right? And so here, what we think about is, okay, we do have a piece that really needs to be scaled with people, or at least it does traditionally. So I think about it as, yeah, this is the article.
Yeah, we'll link them down below.
Sounds great. I think of it as, okay, so in a sales organization, a lot of the coordination is in this idea of who am I reaching out to, like leads, right? And there are a lot of products out there that's really all about how do I identify the right leads? How do I do outbound really effectively? There's a lot of AI tooling there that's really effective. And then you get to the point where it's like this, almost like this, like handoff and communication, transparency piece, right? And this idea of, and this is like the perfect thing for AI. All these conversations are happening. Founder has a conversation, the salesperson has a conversation, the support person has a conversation. How do I know that there's continuity and that we're touching the customer at the right places and doing the right things? The combination of, a gong stitched together with Salesforce stitched together with, literally like agents that we can build internally, like using something like a Dust and, Zapier. Like, you can build a system where you're like, wow, what used to be a lot of coordination costs is just streamlined. Like, we have agents where you're able to say, hey, I'm about to go meet with a customer. I'm new, 6 weeks in, right? Like, I really need to understand the history here. And I have no idea. Like, I haven't been in any of these conversations. How do I, at a glance, pull all the important nuggets for me to go in and have this conversation with this like really critical stakeholder at this company? Right. Hey, again, who is our ICP? And therefore, what are we pointing the sales team towards? And what's really amazing, by the way, I love this industry. Lawyers pick up the phone. So you can call a lawyer and they'll pick up the phone, which is, usually when you're spamming software engineers, they're like, no, thank you. Everything's in a spam folder. And so there's something also there around like, how do you scale some of those motions? Again, we can go on and on, but like the marketing team, what used to take an army, creating content, right? Like you literally, the idea of like writing a blog post, that is totally generated and edited versus like you have a team of writers these days. So every function and what we're doing right now, super exciting, is we are basically almost creating like a master list of agents and being like, these are the core things that humans do that take time. How do we actually create an agent that is connected to the right knowledge bases, data sources, so that instead of a human going and retrieving that information, that is a very routine route thing that an agent can do. So then to me, the workforce is the combination of humans getting leverage through the agents that they are building and using.
Okay, so like basically I was like creating the master list of agents. Is that like based off function, like for example, or like based on results? So is that like, hey, I think like now we need to create like an agent for tracking time or tracking the expense. And do you build that agent yourself or do you ensemble like a group of agents to test if it will work? Like let's say if there's like 5YC startup that's already doing the lawyer time tracking thing, and then you try out their product and be like, yo, we should build whatever this is, but better. Or like, how do you
Yeah. So yeah, two
Yeah.
pieces here. One is like, what are the internal agents you're using to make your business more efficient? And then
Mhm.
if you were building an AI product, how do
Mhm.
you incorporate agents there? And specifically for something like timekeeping, time intelligence, there's a lot of agent work, right? Because you're essentially thinking, what are all the very tedious things that humans are doing, and how do
Yeah.
we turn that into something that is much more of like an agentic workflow? So
Yeah.
two different pieces.
Yeah.
I would say that for the first one, it is 100% a combination of what a success look like for a function, because that doesn't change. It's not like all of a sudden you got AI and like that goes out the door. In fact, it becomes even more important because your ability to spin things up, do things quickly, just 100x, right? So it's even more important to be like, what does success look like for the sales team? What does success look like for the marketing team? What does success look like for EPD, right? Like, and there's a whole, we don't have to go into it, but a whole way to think about that as a system. Then you say, okay, well, for that to be true, I can either scale with humans and who do all of these things. I think it's very important, by the way, you can't just be like, oh, just agent everything. You have to identify what are the things that humans are actually doing and the opportunities for there to be improvement. And that's when you say, okay, well, therefore we need these, 3 agents in engineering, right? I'll give you one example. And I feel like this resonates with so many of you. It's how many times has someone gone to a Slack channel that's titled Ask Product or Ask Engineering, and like it's someone from the sales team or the support team, and they're like, this question. And then somebody gets distracted or it's interrupted in terms of their kind of focus time, and they're going in and they're answering that question because like to some degree it's like urgent, otherwise someone like, why would you be asking that question? And then you just interrupted the engineer or the product manager to answer something that could 100% be answered without that human, because there are like, not only is there documentation, but the fact that you can connect to GitHub and the repository means like, again, like this is very a human thing to be like, okay, well, here's the process. The process is you ship a bunch of stuff, and then there's a PMM who works with a PM to, synthesize what you've done. You create release notes, and then, that is a human thing. All of that is automated today. It should be automated. It's like your release notes. What is more accurate than reading your GitHub? And then having, again, a human auditor, like an eye or review, but like that's way better than being like, I hope you remember what we've shipped. Right. So like it's like that idea of like success, an audit of what you're doing and like what you're doing probably with human hours that less accurate than if you were to connect to what I call the actual sources of truth versus the human interpretation of the source of truth. And that also, by the way, that whole paradigm applies to the concept of time. Everyone's perception of time is always colored in some way. Like, like you think back to what you did yesterday, the day before, like there are things that stand out way more than actually took up, objective time because it was memorable, right? Like we have this human perception layer on how we think about the past. It's never perfect recall. And so just taking that principle and applying it to time, it's like you can't rely on humans to perfectly quantify their time. In fact, what humans are doing is a very tedious thing of being like, I got to create a timesheet. And so I'm going to go and look at all the emails I sent. We just know that, right? Oh, I have to create my timesheet. I need to go and figure out when was the last time I saved changes in this Word document. We just know that, right? And so now talking about like the actual product we build, the way I think about it is, the end of the day, be very clear on what success looks like. A success for us is we give people time back.
Mm-hmm.
We are saving you time from having to do things like quantifying your time, doing your time sheet, that are very tedious. And that, by the way, is just the first slice. The future is one where it's like, we know that taking a deck, like creating a deck, takes a lot of time. There's actually no reason in today's day and age for a deck
Mm-hmm.
creation to take the amount of time it took in 2022 or 2018. I worked in consulting. It took a long time to make decks. In fact, we would send it off to a team, overseas, and like have them do a rev on the deck. And I'm like, all of that is solved today with the way that we do, deck generation, image generation, all the things that AI is really incredible at.
Mm.
So being able to then, like in the product, the way I think about building a product is, what are the things that is, again, the same concept, routine, takes a long time, tedious, can be automated. And typically I look at things that are narrow, have guardrails, right? Because AI's, agents, they're best when you can be very explicit in what it is you're doing. And so you need to be able to say, like, you can't give them a very complex piece unless, again, this is what you're talking about. Like, you can have agents and like sub-agents and an overarching agent, and like each of the sub-agents can take the complexity and take a piece of it, but that still requires you. I just want to be very clear. It's just not like magic that happens. You still need to understand the system in which you're like, oh, this is the thing that I want to happen, and these are the things that need to happen in order for this thing to happen. Okay, now I can turn this into an agent, this into an agent. Like, you still need that thought process. And so never before has like systems thinking and clarity in thinking been more important. And the same way, I'll just, like, for a quick anecdote, like the same way, it's always been important in product to be a crisp communicator, verbally and in written form, right? But it's never been more important, because now when you are crisp, when you're clear, it actually can turn into something besides just the artifact of the document. Prompt engineering is essentially being very crisp in what you are asking for, and also having a strong point of view. Prompt engineering is like, you can't do it well if you don't have a great sense of what the UX or like the final product ends up needing to be, right? Because otherwise it's just like garbage in, garbage out. You're like, oh, that doesn't look right. Like, you need to be like, this is kind of the end state. And again, you can play around a little bit. Like, there's a way to, use AI to clarify your thinking, to be clear. You don't have to be like the perfect, most crystal thinker at the get-go. So you can use tools to make that clear, but ultimately it's so important to be clear. So anyways, that's how I think about both like internally, externally, internally, and product you're building. AI products are all about, what are the things that humans are doing that take a lot of time, and how do we make that magical, automated? And then similar concept of like, what are the things your internal team is doing, and how do you make that the same way?
I have like a few questions there. Like, one thing is like, okay, so like one part is like, when you come into like a company that already have a product, what's your thought process on like building the product, or like add on something on top of it? And then the other part is like, when you're starting from a scratch. So for example, like some of the founders here, maybe like the first time building a product, and then like still trying to find like what to build, or like come up with an idea like from the 0 to 1 phase. Like, what's the differences? And then like, maybe if you could walk us through like a scenario, maybe in both. I feel like you're more like, you're like an obviously an expert in the first place because you joined some of like really big products. But on the other hand, like there's like, I guess I'm sure you have thought about building XYZ on your own at some point, but like as a side hustle, or like just like not even side hustle, just like vibe coding or something. Like, how do you even think about like what to build?
Yeah.
Just like the two questions. Yeah.
I'm going to bring it back to an earlier framework I talked through a little bit, which is, what is your vision and your mission? How do you generate actual business value? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then that comes, and part of that, by the way, breaking even that piece down, what does the customer need? And then, is there an opportunity? And what I mean by that is, there are a lot of things where people find it really painful, but like, they're not actually going to put money there. And so
True.
you can do something for a hobby, but if you want to actually build a business, that's not going to reconcile, right?
Yeah.
So let me just actually go through. I'll actually go through kind of all the products I've worked on, and kind of use each of them as an anecdote. So Dropbox joined consumer love. Consumers, you and I, people are bringing them into into businesses, right? And actually there is a real business problem here, which is I need to share files. That is, I do that as much in my personal life as in my work life. In fact, I probably do it more in my work life. And oh, by the way, when I do it in my work life, it's way cheaper because the files I'm sharing are, one Word file, which is way smaller than the millions of photos that I have. So there's a very clear, what is the next step for Dropbox at that stage? It's like the benefit, the user benefit of being able to share and having it in one place and sharing be seamless to get work done is massive. Actually, way more, I'd say, than even consumer, which is like you kind of do a file drop to your friend, a photo drop to your friend, right? But way bigger in the business. And there's a user want need, and there's a business opportunity. There's a huge business opportunity in making sure that is not only seamless for the user, but more importantly, secure. Right. So when, when IT admins are like, oh my gosh, what is this random thing that people are using, literally sharing my file, but it's like not secure. We haven't bought it. It's not enterprise ready. That's really problematic. And so for Dropbox, the right way to think about what is the next thing to do is this is the situation, customer want, market opportunity. We gotta do enterprise. Okay. So that's like one example. Airbnb. This one's really interesting because I think that, so what I worked on at Airbnb, kind of like just quickly touching through it, is I worked on host growth. And the reason why it was so important is because at the end of the day, when a marketplace like Airbnb gets mature enough, you are supply constrained, meaning people are like, oh, I'm happy to stay on Airbnb. You got the brand, you got my interest. Someone I know had a good experience. Sometimes like I'm willing to try it, but it's limited by your supply. Meaning if you're going somewhere and there's no Airbnb there, you're not going to stay in Airbnb. Right. And the quality of supply, if you go somewhere and you have a terrible Airbnb experience, you're not going to do an Airbnb again. You're gonna be like, I'm going to default to the hotel. So I specifically, the way I think about it as a product person, you always have to go work on the most important problems of the business. And like that applies no matter what level you are. Like, I mean, you might be constrained if you're really junior because you're like, I really want to work on that problem and no one's letting you. But like my advice there is just keep pushing, because at the end of the day, that's actually how you accelerate your career. It's not through doing what your manager wants. It's not through, being more vocal about your work. It's none of that, especially in a world today where like it's all about the speed at which you're moving and the impact you're delivering. So always go to where you're like, this is going to be the biggest impact. And I was like, hey, for the longest time, getting supply on the marketplace at high quality is the most important problem. So I worked on everything from host growth to host quality, right, to like compliance stuff, because like, just making sure that supply actually was there, was compliant, and people really liked it. So that's how I think about, again, like it's not like Airbnb's business for it to grow to not need to be able to be like, oh, I have like 15 million different add-ons. No, people love the Airbnb product at its core, but the big problem is that we had some of these supply challenges, which is what I worked on, or I believe that would drive the most impact. And then, at Webflow, I kind of use that example a little bit, which is like, we can do all the different power tool features everywhere, and like more of the community and our power user Webflow will be really happy. But ultimately, if we do not have a collaborative, again, Webflow was single player when I joined. We did a lot of work to make it incredibly collaborative, so that a marketing team and a designer and even a developer can all kind of work on it, and an agency can work on it at the same time, because that's how you build websites, really enterprise ready, kind of mission critical main.coms. And so that's what we did, like strategy wise, like how do you decide? Well, that's where the value is, and that's where the user need is, and that's where the two things come together. Right. So that's how I think about a lot of the advice I give to founders is, at the end of the day, you need to find the sweet spot of the following things. There is a market opportunity. And again, if there's anything that is most important these days, I think it's that, which is if there is no market demand for what you're doing, you can build the best product, you can do all of these things in an amazing way, but at some point, you're not going to be able to sustain the growth. And more importantly than the growth, because what does growth mean anyways? It's the revenue, right? Like there are lots of companies that are growing a ton in user base, and then they're churning a ton in user base, or at least they're churning a ton in revenue. Like they could be great high growth businesses at, September 5th, but by the time it comes January of next year, they're not going to be sustainable businesses. And that's my biggest advice, which is like, you have to find, again, the side projects are very different. in the sense that like, I don't think it might not be that that's your biggest goal. Like every business has to be sustainable in my mind to be a viable business that is a generational business. Your side project doesn't have to be like, you're not relying on it to make, like many people's lives, livelihoods, right? Like you're just like, this is the thing I do on the side. So that is, I think for me, side projects are more like passion driven. And going back to the perfect sweet spot is there is market pull. There is something that you are uniquely positioned to do well, meaning you have the combination of passion and expertise. Because like you can be the biggest expert, but it doesn't like, tickle your fancy, you're going to stop doing it. You're going to give up. Being a founder is insanely hard. Right. And you can also have great passion, but no expertise, and you're just going to get your lunch eaten.
I wonder, like, so for the expertise part, I feel like for a lot of people, they may know their expertise, but there's like so much roadblocks. So, for example, like as a solo founder, I know my expertise, but the problem is like I have to do like 80% things are like the things I hate. Like, not 80%, but let's call it like 50%. There's like many operational stuff that you have to like taken care of. Like a lot of people think, you know, being on a podcast or like something, it's like just professional yapper. You just go on and yap. But like the thing is like there's so much things that you have to do. You have to book people. You have to like make sure that like people knows what's going on. You have to like set up the logistics. You have to like have obviously hit the revenue target. I actually love revenue or like marketing or sales or BD. Like any those functions, love. But anything operational, I feel like oh my god, like every day that's like what slows you down. Like as a product leader, I'm sure that you will feel like for example, similar to the Airbnb thing that you mentioned, like it's like, yeah, we have supply. Oh, I mean, we have demand, but now we have to build the supply. So how do you kind of like deal with the fact that like, maybe the stuff that you want to build is not like the stuff that you can build because there's like just so much stuff going on to like you have to unblock yourself.
Totally. Okay, let's break that down. First, Grace, advice that I would give you would be if there are things that you like my rule of thumb is like 70-30-ish, meaning you should be doing, there's always going to be mundane things that anyone does or things that they do in their job that you're like,
like log in the timer.
Yeah, exactly. Do your timesheet. There's lots of things I do on a day-to-day basis where I'm like, oh, I really wish I didn't do that. And by the way, my tip there is to be like, anything that you're like, oh my God, perfect opportunity to create automation around it, right? So I would say, one, never before could you scale the things that you hate doing away. So I would say that's one, literally like AI. The second thing I would say is this is where honestly, like maybe headcount is important. And what I mean by that is if you believe that if someone is spending energy on something that is so draining, they will never be able to spend energy on the things that is actually their superpower. And by doubling, I'm just using a rough rule of thumb, but like, let's say you double the amount of time you spend on something that gives you energy, your business could grow significantly more than you kind of offloading the part that doesn't give you energy to something else. And again, this is the big question today, which is how much of it can you offload without a human? Are there things that you can literally be like, I do this thing every single day. Every day that I go live, I do A, B, C, and D. I'm going to create a way for these things to be sent automatically. That's my first push, because like if you do that, then A, you don't have to do it, and you don't have to pay someone to do it. But or you maybe have to use a few tools, but the cost of tools compared to a person is generally like lower. Then I think if you hit an upper limit and you're like, I just need a human to do a piece of this that I do not want to do, and it actually does not make sense for me to do it, because again, the ROI on this is why I'm at Laurel. Like the ROI on my time is everyone's most precious resource. Period. Period. Right. And so like you can, at some point you can have all the money in the world, and ultimately you're going to be constrained by your time on earth. And so there, like, I really believe that I like going back to embracing the adventure, going back to a lot of things I touched on today, like time is your most precious resource. And that's why, everyone at Laurel cares so deeply about our mission. And so going back to, if time is your most precious resource and you're spending a bunch of your time doing stuff that you want to do and you can't automate it away, then I think that for the growth of the business net, like you should actually scale. Right. And really that's how I think about scale in general. There's a lot of talk around like, when do you take venture capital, like all that stuff. It's like, you do it, you always invest to grow. That is just that's how you think about it. If you don't believe you can get growth, don't take the funding and don't invest. But if you know that you can get growth invest sustainably. And kind of that's what I would push you and anyone who's kind of in that boat to think about.
I love that. How do you find oh, I want to be mindful of time. Maybe we'll do one real question and then one last minute fire round. So how do you find the like solution on some of the problems? So like I think like whenever I think about like why like I mean I've built stuff on Lovable, but like the major problem is like right now if it connected to like LinkedIn, connected to StreamYard, connected to like 5 other external tools, like combination wise, like I think it's like the API, the connecting X to Y, and then like if LinkedIn ban me for good or whatever, like those are like all the stuff that I'm like thinking about because like there's like a lot of company or software that doesn't allow you to use like a third party software, and then like that makes it kind of like drain, and then like also what AI tool to use, like how do you kind of solve the problem of like um the complex like orchestrational things? Is there like an AI for that?
I mean, yes,
Yup,
and
for
yeah,
agents, you heard
yeah,
it
yes,
here.
yes. I was like, without sounding like a broken clock, yes. But maybe I'll give you again. Concrete examples are always more helpful than like
Mhm,
high level thoughts. I very much believe that the more you can say, hey, I can vibe code, I can prototype, whatever term you want to use, in a
mhm,
way that looks exactly like my product. Because that's a big
mhm,
problem. You're like on V0, you're on Lovable, you're on everything. And you're like, it's like using those colors that aren't my colors. And like people can't actually squint and be like, this is what I mean. So I think the
mhm,
first thing is you have to make the thing that you're building look like your product. And there's ways to do that actually, like
mhm,
building components that are using your, like, first of all, you have to actually create components, because if you don't spend the time up front to make that the case,
mhm,
you're not going to get the benefit later. So one,
mhm,
actually componentizing a lot of your product.
mhm.
Then, and I like a big shout out, big fan. Thank you, Colin. We're working with this awesome person named Colin Matthews. He's been teaching teaching things around prototyping for quite some time. How do we like? I think the reality is you need people, whether it's inside your organization or outside your organization, who are always using the latest and greatest and thinking about this problem of like, how do I connect all the pieces together? So how do I make it so that I can, and here's a reality, like, are you going to get your CX team, your sales team, and even some of your designers maybe to open up Cursor? Probably
Mhm,
not. Again, I'm pushing the design piece, but there's
mhm,
going to be some line of like, oh man, there's a barrier to spinning up the ID. And
mhm,
so I think a lot about this. It's almost like how I think of a product. Like you think about the highest points of friction and you remove them. So you're like, okay, it's a really high point of friction to like make everyone with a cursor, like get all this stuff set up, installed. But if I configure, let's just say Lovable, that has my components, right? And
mhm,
call it my components, so that someone can just go into a web app and be able to like, prototype something that looks like what I have. But again, they're using underlying components that are valid and working and have real code behind them, so that the journey to take the thing that's been prototyped and then have a PR that's been generated by Cursor or Devin that's literally ready for review, that is
mhm.
what how you can stitch it all together. So companies that are really doing this well, and I'm seeing this at Laurel, I'm seeing this at a few other places, but again, not everywhere. The rate limiter to the how quickly you can build is how quickly you can review PRs, which
Mm.
is amazing. Like this is like my dream. Like every product person's dream. Like for the past, it's been like, oh my gosh, I would love to build this thing, but I only have so many, engineering resources. Which again, for all of the years I've been doing this, I'm so attuned to be like, what does the engineer need? They need donuts. I'm gonna bring you donuts. They need coffee. I'm bringing you coffee. Right? Like, and
Yeah.
again, I will still do that. I love you, engineers, but this idea of like, again, there's still the rate limiter.
Converter from coffee to code.
They're the rate limiter, because I still need them to review, and
Mhm,
more importantly than just review, I need them to architect the system in such a way where when you deploy agents on the code base, it
mhm,
works, versus being like, oh my gosh, spaghetti code, what's even going on? Or like, I can't like go into this other repo. So still the rate limiter, but in a way that is vastly different than it was in the past. And in a way that is just so liberating, because we are building at a speed that I've never seen before. And that's the
mhm.
best how to be a builder.
I love that. On that note, oh, I wanna end with, like, a 2-second fire round for you.
Okay.
Okay, what's your favorite book?
Um, Oh man, I don't even know. I love so many different books, but I almost go back to my childhood books of like Ender's Game and like Harry Potter. Like those are my favorite books.
Love. Who would you invite to a dinner party?
Who would I invite to a dinner party? Um, I recently spent time with Meg Whitman. I'd love to go back to dinner with her. She's amazing.
Wow. She's such an iconic person. I wrote her a letter and then she like wrote back. She wrote me back when I was younger. Yeah, it was like a long time ago. And then maybe her team did. And then like she like sent me her book. I was like crying. But
And she's
anyway.
joining to help Laurel, like
Oh wow.
advising and everything. So it's been great. So I'm gonna go back and get that dinner time.
Love. Who would you wait, who made the biggest impact in your career?
um, there are a lot of people that jump to mind, but I would say Chen-Li. I don't know if you're watching this, but like the combination of Chen-Li and Dan. And Dan, I don't know if you're watching this, but
Mhm.
Dan brought me into Dropbox, and I spent a lot of time working with a few people at Dropbox, but notably Chen-Li for some time. And
Wonderful.
Wonderco,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah. Nice. I went to their dinner during the pandemic. It was like pretty great. Uh, who made where can we find you outside of work?
My Linktree. My Linktree has all the things.
Amazing. Well, Jay-Z, thank you so much for coming to the show today. It was such a fun conversation and a
Thank you.
master class for building a AI product.
So great to chat. Thanks for having me.
Okay.
We'll go to Vic soon. So we'll get
Yes, exactly. Wait, let me quickly end stream. End stream.